There's a space between what we know and what we actually do, and it's in that space where most dreams quietly fade away. We read the books, we watch the videos, we make plans, write goals, and talk about what we will do. And yet, most of us stop there. The truth is, knowing how to do something doesn't make a difference until we take that first uncomfortable step. Knowledge doesn't create change, action does. We often convince ourselves that we need more information, more preparation, or the perfect moment before we begin. But the perfect moment doesn't exist. The longer we wait, the wider the gap grows between what we know and what we do until our ideas become nothing more than what could have been. Why does this happen? Because knowing feels safe, doing doesn't. Knowing keeps us in control, but doing demands vulnerability. It means risking failure, embarrassment, and rejection. Yet, that's exactly where growth lives, on the other side of fear. Action is the antidote to fear. Every time we act, we shrink the gap. We prove to ourselves that we're capable. We learn through experience, and that learning becomes confidence. The people who achieve their dreams aren't necessarily the smartest or the most talented. They're simply the ones who refuse to let the gap stay open. They understand that progress doesn't come from endless preparation, but from persistent movement. So, the next time you catch yourself saying, "I know I should," stop and ask, "Then why am I not doing it?" Dreams disappear in hesitation. They come alive in action, because the difference between a dreamer and a doer is not what they know, it's what they do about what they know. Knowing something and doing something are two entirely different worlds. Awareness gives us understanding, but action gives us transformation. Many people live their entire lives within the comfort of awareness. They know what success looks like. They understand what habits create change, and they can even articulate the principles of achievement. Yet, they stop at the level of comprehension. Knowledge, when not converted into behavior, becomes a form of illusion. It makes us feel capable without ever requiring proof. In education, for instance, students spend years learning theories, models, and frameworks. They can explain complex ideas, recall definitions, and discuss methodologies. However, until they apply that knowledge, until they attempt, fail, and correct, the learning remains incomplete. Awareness provides the map, but only action begins the journey. A person can memorize the road, but without taking the first step, they never leave where they are. This is the difference between potential and performance. The comfort of awareness comes from certainty. We like to stay in spaces where we feel competent, where we can analyze and plan without the risk of failure. But action introduces uncertainty. The moment we act, we expose ourselves to the possibility of not getting it right, of being judged, or of facing unexpected outcomes. This fear of unpredictability often freezes people in the realm of knowing. They gather more information, believing that more knowledge will make them ready. Yet readiness rarely comes before action, it grows because of it. Cognitive science describes this as the knowing-doing gap. Humans tend to overestimate the power of intellect and underestimate the power of consistent behavior. We assume that understanding something automatically improves our ability to act on it. For example, millions know that regular exercise improves health, that consistent study habits enhance learning, or that financial discipline builds stability. Still, very few translate that understanding into daily routines. This disconnect reveals that awareness is intellectual, but action is emotional and behavioral. It requires will, not just comprehension. Awareness without execution can also become a trap of false progress. When we consume information, our brain releases dopamine, giving us a sense of accomplishment even though nothing tangible has changed. Watching a motivational video or reading a book about leadership feels productive, but it is merely the first step. Until that insight is tested through real practice, it remains an unused tool. The purpose of knowing is doing, otherwise, knowledge becomes ornamental, not operational. Bridging the distance between awareness and action requires humility. It demands that we accept that our understanding is only valuable when it translates into outcomes. This shift often begins with smaller, consistent actions rather than grand gestures. For example, someone who learns about time management can spend hours studying different strategies, but the learning only becomes real when they start scheduling their day and sticking to the plan. Each attempt, whether successful or not, transforms abstract knowledge into practical wisdom. The process of moving from awareness to action also nurtures adaptability. Once we begin doing, we start to see where our knowledge falls short. Action reveals the limitations of theory, forcing us to refine and adjust. This feedback loop strengthens both competence and confidence. Without action, learning remains sterile, untouched by reality, and immune to growth. Experience, even when it involves failure, enriches understanding far more than passive observation ever can. In organizational behavior, this gap becomes even more visible. Companies often hold meetings discussing innovation, productivity, or culture change. Employees may understand the new policies or strategies intellectually, but unless those ideas are practiced daily in decision, making, communication, and habits, the organization remains unchanged. True progress happens only when awareness becomes embedded in behavior. The same principle applies to individuals. Our identity does not evolve from what we know, but from what we repeatedly do. Action also activates emotional intelligence. Knowing what empathy is, for example, is different from practicing it. Understanding communication theory is different from engaging in a difficult conversation with patience and openness. Every act of application deepens emotional maturity and personal growth. Awareness alone cannot cultivate empathy, resilience, or leadership. Those qualities emerge only through experience. Another reason awareness rarely becomes action is the absence of accountability. When knowledge stays private, there is no external force compelling execution. Declaring our intentions, seeking mentorship, or setting measurable goals transforms knowledge into commitment. Accountability shortens the distance between understanding and behavior because it creates responsibility. Awareness and action must coexist as partners, not opposites. Awareness provides direction, it tells us what to do and why it matters. Action gives that direction movement, it answers the question of how. Without awareness, action is blind. Without action, awareness is empty. The most effective learners, leaders, and creators are those who constantly cycle between the two. They learn, apply, reflect, and then learn again. In that rhythm, growth becomes inevitable. Awareness opens the door, but action walks through it. The transformation from knowing to doing is not a single leap, it is a disciplined crossing made up of decisions, risks, and persistence. Each act, however small, shrinks the gap between intention and reality. The world does not remember those who only knew, it remembers those who acted on what they knew. The space between knowing and doing is often filled with fear, an invisible wall that separates intention from execution. Fear disguises itself in many forms: fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of judgment, and even fear of success. It is not the lack of ability that holds people back, but the emotional resistance that arises when action threatens comfort. Knowing feels safe because it requires no risk. Doing feels dangerous because it exposes us to the possibility of loss. Fear of failure is perhaps the most common barrier. When people imagine taking action, they also imagine what could go wrong. The human brain is wired to avoid pain, so it exaggerates potential negative outcomes. A student may hesitate to present their idea, fearing it will be criticized. An entrepreneur may delay launching a business, worried it might not succeed. This hesitation is not due to lack of knowledge, but due to the psychological discomfort of uncertainty. Ironically, the longer we wait to act, the stronger the fear becomes, feeding itself through avoidance. Another form of fear is the fear of judgment. Human beings are social by nature, and acceptance plays a crucial role in our sense of belonging. When we act, we expose ourselves to public perception, and that vulnerability can feel threatening. Many people prefer to remain silent even when they have valuable ideas because they fear how others might react. They overthink potential criticism, replay conversations in their minds, and convince themselves that staying quiet is safer. This self-censorship prevents growth and innovation. The fear of what others might think silently erases countless dreams before they are even attempted. Closely connected is the fear of imperfection. People often delay action because they want everything to be perfect before they begin. This perfectionism masquerades as high standards, but it is usually fear in disguise, fear of producing something flawed or incomplete. The truth is that nothing starts perfect. Every masterpiece begins as a rough draft, every expert was once a beginner, and every success story includes mistakes. Waiting for perfection means waiting forever, because progress depends on iteration, not flawless beginnings. There is also a subtler fear, the fear of success. At first, it seems illogical, but success changes things. It brings new responsibilities, higher expectations, and sometimes unfamiliar pressure. Some individuals unconsciously avoid action because they fear the weight that comes with achievement. They worry about maintaining success, about being compared to their past self, or about losing comfort in the pursuit of growth. This hidden fear keeps them anchored in mediocrity even when they are capable of more. Fear thrives in the absence of clarity. When the mind is uncertain about what lies ahead, it fills the gap with worst-case scenarios. Clarity reduces fear because it replaces imagination with information. Taking even small steps can transform overwhelming fear into manageable challenge. Once action begins, the mind adjusts. What once seemed impossible becomes familiar. Movement creates momentum, and momentum weakens fear's influence. In behavioral psychology, this is explained through the concept of exposure. The more we face what we fear, the less power it holds over us. A person afraid of public speaking can read endlessly about communication, but fear fades only when they begin to speak, even if their voice trembles at first. Each attempt desensitizes the fear response and builds confidence. Fear cannot be eliminated intellectually. It must be experienced and transcended through doing. Fear and inaction also feed on overthinking. The analytical mind, while useful for planning, can become a barrier when it replaces decision-making with endless contemplation. This phenomenon, often called analysis paralysis, creates a loop of constant evaluation without movement. The individual convinces themselves that they are preparing, but in truth, they are procrastinating. Action breaks this cycle because it converts uncertainty into evidence. Every result, whether success or failure, provides clarity that thinking alone can never offer. In educational and professional contexts, fear is amplified by comparison. The modern environment constantly showcases the achievements of others, making individuals doubt their own capabilities. They hesitate to act because they feel inadequate next to those who seem more talented or successful. This comparison traps them in passivity, forgetting that every expert once began as a learner. Growth does not come from competing with others, but from challenging one's own limits. Neuroscience shows that fear activates the amygdala, the brain's alarm system, which triggers a fight, flight, or freeze a response. When people hesitate to act, they are often in the freeze stage, paralyzed between desire and doubt. To counter this, deliberate small actions signal safety to the brain. Each successful attempt rewires the neural pathway, teaching the mind that action is not dangerous. Gradually, confidence replaces anxiety. Fear also distorts time. When people delay action because of fear, they believe they are buying safety, but they are actually losing opportunity. Time spent in hesitation is time lost in potential. Every moment of inaction widens the gap between knowing and doing. The longer fear controls decisions, the more it becomes a habit. Breaking that habit requires conscious effort, choosing courage over comfort repeatedly until it becomes natural. Courage, in this context, is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. Every act of courage weakens fear's authority. When individuals learn to interpret fear not as a signal to stop, but as a sign of importance that something meaningful is at stake, they begin to move differently. Fear becomes guidance rather than resistance. It points toward growth, indicating areas where we are ready to expand. Ultimately, fear exists to protect us, but it often overprotects. It keeps us safe from danger, but also safe from discovery. The challenge is not to destroy fear, but to manage it, to listen to its warnings without obeying its limitations. The transition from knowing to doing begins the moment we decide that fear may visit, but it will not drive. Motivation is powerful, but it is temporary. It sparks excitement, fuels ambition, and makes action feel effortless for a while. Yet, motivation fades the moment challenges appear, moods shift, or comfort becomes more appealing. Discipline, however, endures. It is the quiet, consistent force that continues to move forward long after motivation disappears. The difference between those who merely start and those who actually succeed lies not in how motivated they feel, but in how disciplined they remain when motivation is gone. Motivation depends on emotion. It is influenced by circumstances, energy levels, and external stimuli. People often wait for the right moment, to begin when they feel inspired, confident, or ready, but emotions are unpredictable. If action is tied to how one feels, progress becomes inconsistent. Discipline, on the other hand, is independent of emotion. It functions through commitment. It says, I will do this, not because I feel like it, but because I decided to. Discipline transforms action into habit and habit into identity. The human mind is designed to seek comfort and avoid discomfort. Motivation usually thrives in comfort. Discipline thrives in discomfort. Motivation says, I'll act when I'm inspired. Discipline says, I'll act even when I'm tired. This difference defines outcomes. The most successful individuals in education, business, or personal growth are rarely those who feel inspired every day. They are those who act consistently regardless of emotion. They build systems instead of relying on moods. Discipline begins with structure. It requires clear goals, routines, and boundaries. Without structure, even strong motivation becomes scattered. A student motivated to improve grades may study intensely for a day, then lose focus the next. But a disciplined student follows a schedule, studies in small intervals, and shows up daily. Over time, those small, consistent efforts create exponential results. Discipline does not rely on bursts of energy. It relies on momentum built through repetition. The psychology of habit formation explains this clearly. When a behavior is repeated consistently, it becomes automatic. The brain begins to associate specific cues with specific actions. For example, sitting at a desk signals study time, or waking up early signals exercise. Each repetition strengthens a neural pathway, reducing the mental effort required to act. This is how discipline turns difficult tasks into normal routines. Motivation cannot achieve this. It fluctuates too much to create stability. Discipline also develops resilience. Motivation often disappears in the face of failure, but discipline turns failure into feedback. A motivated person might give up when results don't appear quickly. A disciplined person adjusts, learns, and continues. Discipline teaches patience, the understanding that progress is not immediate but incremental. It accepts that mastery is a process, not a moment. This perspective prevents discouragement and builds endurance. In educational environments, motivation often drives initial enthusiasm. A student may begin the semester inspired by goals and aspirations. But as workload increases and challenges arise, motivation declines. Those who rely only on motivation begin to procrastinate, while those guided by discipline persist. They study even when it feels repetitive, attend classes even when tired, and complete assignments even when uninspired. This consistency creates competence, and competence eventually renews motivation, forming a sustainable cycle. Discipline also provides focus. Motivation can be impulsive. It makes people chase new ideas constantly. One day, they are excited about one goal, the next, something else seems more interesting. Discipline filters distractions. It allows individuals to stay committed to long-term objectives rather than short-term impulses. This focus leads to mastery. In contrast, relying on motivation alone leads to fragmentation, starting many things but finishing few. Discipline requires self-control, which is a skill, not a trait. It can be developed through deliberate practice. Setting small, achievable goals builds trust with oneself. Each completed task reinforces the belief that one can follow through. This internal trust becomes the foundation of discipline. Over time, the question shifts from "do I feel like doing this?" to "have I decided to do this?" The shift in language reflects a shift in identity from being driven by emotion to being governed by intention. A major obstacle to discipline is the modern obsession with comfort and instant gratification. Society constantly rewards speed, fast results, quick success, immediate pleasure. Discipline works in the opposite direction. It demands patience and delayed reward. It trains the mind to value long-term fulfillment over short-term satisfaction. The athlete who trains daily without visible progress, the writer who edits the same page repeatedly, the learner who studies after failure all demonstrate the essence of discipline. They act not for immediate reward but for eventual excellence. In neuroscience, discipline is linked to the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for planning and decision-making. Each time a person resists distraction or chooses effort over comfort, they strengthen this region, enhancing willpower. Motivation activates the emotional brain, discipline engages the rational one. This biological distinction explains why discipline sustains progress even when emotions fluctuate. Discipline also redefines freedom. Many believe discipline restricts freedom, but in reality, it creates it. Without discipline, people become slaves to impulses and procrastination. With discipline, they gain control over their choices. A disciplined person can choose rest because they have earned it, not because they escaped work. True freedom is not the absence of rules. It is the mastery of self within them. In professional life, discipline builds trust. Colleagues, leaders, and clients rely on those who are consistent. Motivation may deliver great performance occasionally, but discipline delivers reliability every time. It transforms ambition into credibility. Those who practice discipline become dependable not only to others, but also to themselves. Discipline also nurtures integrity. It aligns actions with values, ensuring that behavior reflects purpose rather than mood. When discipline guides behavior, goals are pursued even when no one is watching. This silent consistency builds character. Ultimately, discipline sustains what motivation begins. Motivation lights the spark, but discipline keeps the flame alive through routine, perseverance, and self-mastery. Where motivation says start, discipline says continue. It is the bridge that connects intention to completion, turning fleeting inspiration into lasting achievement. Real transformation does not happen in the mind, it happens in motion. Knowledge gives direction, but action gives shape. Until an idea is acted upon, it remains theory, potential energy waiting to be released. Doing is the process through which learning becomes living and intention becomes identity. It is the moment when understanding evolves into experience. Transformation is not an intellectual event. It is a behavioral one. Every act of doing begins with uncertainty. The mind, comfortable with knowing, resists the unpredictability of action. Yet, it is precisely within this uncertainty that growth emerges. When we act, we engage not only the intellect, but also emotion, instinct, and creativity. Each step taken in reality teaches what no amount of thought can. Action exposes gaps in knowledge, reveals hidden strengths, and refines judgment. What was once abstract becomes concrete. What was once imagined becomes tested truth. In education, transformation through doing is the core of experiential learning. A student may study theories of communication, leadership, or science endlessly, but true comprehension develops only when they apply that knowledge in real situations. Presenting a speech, leading a project, or conducting an experiment transforms information into understanding. Mistakes made in the process are not failures, they are feedback mechanisms. Every action, whether successful or not, refines skill and deepens wisdom. The process of doing activates multiple dimensions of learning. Cognitive science shows that practical engagement enhances memory retention and comprehension because the brain encodes experiences more deeply when senses, emotions, and movement are involved. Reading about problem solving activates knowledge, but solving a problem activates transformation. The learner becomes more adaptable, confident, and capable of transferring skills across contexts. Action transforms self-perception. When individuals act on their knowledge, they begin to see themselves as capable participants rather than passive observers. A person who has only read about courage can imagine bravery, but one who takes a difficult stand experiences it. The act itself redefines identity. Repeated action builds self-efficacy, the belief in one's ability to influence outcomes. Each successful attempt, however small, reshapes internal dialogue from "I think I can" to "I know I can." Transformation through doing also dissolves the fear of imperfection. People often postpone action until they feel ready or certain. But readiness is born from repetition, not from waiting. The first attempt is rarely perfect, the second is better, the third carries insight. Doing provides clarity that thinking alone cannot deliver. Plans become refined not by imagining better ones, but by testing imperfect ones. Progress replaces paralysis when people choose to start rather than prepare endlessly. In creative fields, this principle is universal. Writers improve through writing, not through thinking about writing. Musicians evolve through practice, not through studying music theory alone. Entrepreneurs grow through experimentation, not through endless strategy sessions. The process of doing shapes the mind in ways that theory cannot anticipate. Each decision made in real time trains intuition, problem solving, and emotional resilience. Transformation through doing also builds adaptability. Plans may fail, markets may shift, people may respond differently than expected, but those who act learn to adjust. They gain the ability to pivot, to reinterpret challenges, and to find new paths toward the same vision. This adaptability is the foundation of innovation. Knowledge prepares the blueprint, doing reveals how to build it in the real world. Without execution, even the best ideas remain untested assumptions. In professional environments, organizations that prioritize doing over discussing evolve faster. Teams that experiment, prototype, and iterate learn more in a week than teams that debate strategies for months. Execution exposes inefficiencies, reveals opportunities, and accelerates improvement. The same principle applies personally. 1 hour of action produces more insight than a month of contemplation. Experience compresses learning time by replacing speculation with evidence. Doing also nurtures emotional growth. When individuals act, they face uncertainty, risk, and pressure. These experiences strengthen emotional intelligence, the ability to manage stress, remain patient, and recover from failure. Confidence is not built through affirmation, but through endurance. The act of doing trains emotional muscles that no motivational thought can replace. Through repeated action, fear transforms into familiarity, and uncertainty transforms into courage. Transformation is cumulative. Every action compounds over time, shaping behavior, habits, and eventually character. A single act of courage may feel small, but consistent action builds identity. A disciplined person is simply someone who has chosen to act repeatedly, regardless of mood. A skilled professional is someone who has practiced consistently, refining ability through experience. Transformation, therefore, is not sudden, it is the natural result of persistent doing. The feedback loop between action and reflection strengthens transformation. Doing without reflection becomes mechanical. Reflection without doing becomes theoretical. Together, they create mastery. After each action, evaluation allows learning to settle and strategies to evolve. This process, known as active learning, ensures continuous improvement. The more one does and reflects, the sharper awareness becomes and the faster growth occurs. Transformation through doing also fosters humility. When individuals act, they encounter limitations. They realize that knowledge alone is insufficient and that learning is never complete. Each experience exposes what is unknown, encouraging curiosity and continuous learning. This humility fuels growth, as it keeps the learner open to correction and new perspectives. Doing removes arrogance by confronting reality directly. In societal terms, communities and nations progress not through the knowledge they possess, but through the actions they take. Innovation, reform, and change arise from implementation, not intention. Every advancement in history, scientific, artistic, or social, has come from those who dared to act on what they knew. Knowledge provided vision, doing created transformation. On a psychological level, action builds momentum. Once movement begins, resistance decreases. The hardest step is always the first one. Afterward, progress gathers rhythm. This momentum reinforces motivation and creates a cycle of achievement. Doing becomes self-sustaining because results, however small, generate satisfaction, and satisfaction reinforces further action. Transformation through doing ultimately bridges the gap between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is information, wisdom is applied understanding. When individuals act on what they know, they integrate lessons not only intellectually but emotionally and physically. Their knowledge becomes embodied, visible in behavior, decision, making, and character. The transformation is no longer about what they know, but about who they become.